Hello and welcome to ReallyBigHat. My name is Jared, and I would normally be welcoming you to D&D Quick Builds, but today we're going to be doing something a little different, and I'm going to be going in depth into a very specific character concept, step by step, and explaining all of the decisions I've made along the way, instead of just breezing through them. So, welcome to D&D Builds! Today, we're covering the Faerie Knight. So what is a Faerie Knight? Well, in game terms, it's going to be a multi-class between an Oath of the Ancients Paladin and an Faerie Warlock. I like to think of them as a guardian of some natural force, or a sacred grove, or some such thing where they've taken a knightly vow to respect and defend nature, but they've also aligned themselves with a powerful fae from the area that also has designs upon nature or a specific grove or what have you. This character's call to adventure would likely be a threat to the natural elements or to their sacred grove, and they could be prompted by either their deity or their patron or both to go out and, seek out whatever corrupting influence is harming the natural order. I like to think of it as a good alternative to playing a druid or maybe a totem barbarian, for those players that want to be involved in the natural elements of the world, but don't necessarily want to play a druid. Maybe you've played a lot of druids, or maybe you just don't like druids, or whatever. But this is another angle into having that I'm going to protect the natural order, even though I'm not technically charged by nature itself. I've taken a vow to a deity and to a fae, other entities that have a vested interest in keeping the natural order. But all in all, the angle of this character is to be a well-armed and armored natural defender, an actual frontline force that will go out and directly physically challenge threats to nature. And I like that concept of being a knight in service to nature rather than being a natural protector of it. It's just a different angle on it. So now that you know what the character is, let's get started building. So you actually have a lot of really good choices for races here. You could obviously go for anything nature-based. You could be a wood elf, or some kind of satyr, or any kind of natural creature. A centaur would actually be a really interesting one. But for this build specifically, I've gone for a human, because I like to think of humans as outsiders in nature, but still part of it, and I just kind of wanted that energy to flow through the zeitgeist of the character. So for languages here, you've really got a choice between Elvish and Sylvan for this kind of a build. That guardian of nature, I know the forests really well type of character. I've gone with Elvish here, and I've taken Sylvan with my background. Those are the two languages that this type of character would really be expected to know, so I like to play to type, especially with languages, so that it's easy for each player and the DM to know who speaks what languages. But that's an aside. I've gone with Elvish and Sylvan for my languages. For the ability score increase, I've gone with Charisma and Strength. We're going to be a Paladin and a Warlock, so we need both of those to be high. Picking a skill here is actually a really tough choice, since there's a lot that I want, but I went with Perception. We're actually only going to end up with a 10 Wisdom, and this feels like a character that would have at least decent perception, so I really wanted to have that, and this is the only way to get it, because we don't get it with the background I've selected, and we don't get it from our starting skills as a Paladin. Choosing a feat here is actually also a pretty tough choice. I've gone with Great Weapon Master, because this is going to be a frontline damage dealer as well as, a hang back and cast character. We can kind of play the best of both worlds with it, but at the end of the day, we're a paladin, we've got a big greatsword, we want to go in and bust some heads. I really played around with taking Fey Touched here just for character reasons, because that would seem appropriate, but really, this is one instance where I've decided to be a little bit more meta and focus on what the character can do rather than who they are. Now, at early levels, Great Weapon Master, you might not want to be using too much, because you're going to have a negative penalty to attack with to start out. But we are going to be having some spells that are going to help compensate for that. Bless, namely. So, really, it's going to be up to your own discretion how often you actually take the -5 penalty to get the +10 to damage. Early on, I would recommend using it a bit sparingly, though. So, skipping over class for now and going straight to our abilities, I've done a point buy here because that's the standard, I feel, and it's a really good reflection of what you can do with any given character. Paladins are a little bit attribute hungry, so it's really hard to distribute the skills sometimes. I've brought Strength and Charisma up to 16, mainly for multi-classing purposes, and so that both of those are good stats. I've brought Con up to 14 because it's as high as I could get it after that, and I brought Wisdom up to 10 so that it's not negative, but I've left Dex and Intelligence at 8. We're going to have a couple of negative modifiers. We're not going to be any good at Stealth, and no good with the speaking of the words. But, we are going to be actually pretty persuasive, so, maybe we all are going to be good at the speaking of the words. Let's put it this way. We won't have an idea what we're saying, but dang, will we sound confident. Anyway, with our attributes laid out, now's the time to go back and cover our first class, which is, of course, going to be Paladin. We get several things. Our proficiencies in all armor and shields, and simple and martial weapons. This right here is one of the reasons that I like to start with Paladin instead of Warlock for a build like this, is to get heavy armor proficiency so that we can be wearing plate armor and possibly using a shield if you want. Like I said, this build is a two-handed weapon user. We're going with Great Weapon Master, but a shield is an option. You'd have to take Warcaster if you wanted to cast with both hands occupied, but really, that's a thought for another video entirely. We get saving throws in Wisdom and Charisma. Wisdom is pretty common, Charisma far less so, but you really don't want to be on the bad end of one of them. And as a Paladin, once we get to level 6, our Charisma modifier is going to be adjusting all of our saving throws up, so, that's another thing to keep in mind when you're building a Paladin. We also get to choose 2 skills from Athletics, Insight, Intimidation, Medicine, Persuasion, and Religion. I've gone with Persuasion and Intimidation to get some social stuff going. Our Charisma is good, so we want to have those skills at our disposal. We don't necessarily always have to take all of them. We won't have Deception, so we won't be a very good liar, but we'll still have that Charisma to back us up if the need ever arises. Anyway, moving on, we also get Divine Sense. This is a bit of a niche ability. It's campaign dependent how useful it is. We can sense the locations of any celestial, fiends, or undeads within 60 feet of us that isn't behind total cover. So, if we're in, like, a mansion or something and there's a ghost behind the door, we're SOL. But, it can come in handy sometimes if it turns out, hey, that guy's actually a zombie. Who knew? We also get Lay on Hands, which is a really good feature. We get 5 points per Paladin level, and we can dish that out as needed to heal people up, including ourselves. And we can also expend 5 at once to cure the target of a disease or neutralize a poison affecting it. That's pretty good. So, we've got a lot of abilities right out of the gate as Paladin. We don't have spellcasting yet, but we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, moving on to our background. I have gone with Outlander. It's kind of my standard, you grew up in a forest background. It's right there in the description. We get proficiencies with Athletics and Survival. We get musical instrument of our choice. I've gone with a lute. That literally doesn't matter unless you want it to matter. That's going to be a very campaign-dependent and character-dependent thing. We also get another language. I've gone with Sylvan here. I already covered that earlier. And we get the Wanderer feature, which is actually not that bad. We have an excellent memory for maps and geography, and we can always recall the general layout of terrain, settlements, and other features around us. In addition, we can find food and fresh water for ourselves and up to 5 other people each day, provided that the land offers berries, small game, water, and so forth. That can kind of cover a survival series, in your campaign pretty well just on its own. And always knowing the general layout around you can come in handy. If you personally forget where you were going, you can be like, well, I've got this feature. So that's not bad. But yeah, that's what I've done for background here. Starting equipment, this is pretty standard stuff. We get the choice between a martial weapon and a shield or 2 martial weapons. We are going to need a greatsword, and I like to take something with reach in addition to that, just in case the situation demands it. You know, if something is just out of your movement range and you really need to poke it with a stick, take a glaive. You know, it's not going to kill you. There's also a javelin for the same purpose, but glaive has better damage output, so it goes, we want to use the greatsword first. If we can't quite reach, use the glaive. If we still can't reach, use the javelin. Then we get an explorer's pack. It's got a number of things in it that, you know, depending on how your DM rules things, may or may not be useful. And the choice between a priest pack and an explorer's pack is completely up to you and your campaign and what you're expecting to need. We also get chainmail, so we're going to start with 16 AC, and a holy symbol. I've taken an amulet. Obviously, you take whatever you want here. It's your spellcasting focus, so again, depending on how your DM makes you manage your inventory, this could be really important, or it could be not important at all. Then we also get equipment from our background, Outlander. We get a staff, a hunting trap, a trophy from an animal we killed, a set of traveler's clothes, and a pouch containing 10 gold. Just add all of that into the ye old backpack, and you're good to go. So here's our character sheet at level 1. I'll give you a minute to just soak it in, but some of the highlights here are 12 HP, 16 armor class. We've got our greatsword doing 2d6 plus 3 slashing. We've got athletics, intimidation, perception, persuasion, and survival proficiencies. Disadvantage on stealth due to the heavy armor. Our passive perception is 12. We've got proficiency in all armor and shields, all weapons. We do have a loot proficiency, and we speak Common, Elvish, and Sylvan. And yeah, our walking speed is normal. Proficiencies +2 here at level 1. Everything as it should be. So, coming back here to level 2 now of Paladin. First up, we get a fighting style. I've gone with defense. It's either going to be this or great weapon fighting. And really, I prefer defense, especially in a build like this where we're going to be rolling a lot of dice for a lot of different features. You know, having to pick up and re-roll 1s and 2s on your weapon damage, you know, it's good, but I prefer the nice, flat, simple +1 bonus to AC. We also get spell casting. Huge feature. Best feature in the game, obviously. And we get Divine Smite. So whenever we hit with a melee weapon attack, we can expend a spell slot to deal radiant damage. The extra damage is 2d8 for a first level slot, plus an additional d8 for each spell slot higher than first, to a maximum of 5d8. Damage increases by 1d8 if the target is undead or a fiend. This is another great feature. It's a great way to Nova, add some extra damage, especially if you manage to crit, because you double all the dice for that. Moving over to our spell casting, we can prepare up to 4 spells, and I've selected a smattering that I feel is appropriate to the character here. But really what you want is Bless. You bless up to 3 creatures of your choice. Whenever a target makes an attack roll or a saving throw before the spell ends, the target can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the attack roll or saving throw. This is what's going to make Great Weapon Master a usable feat, is getting to add that d4. And being able to give it to 2 of your allies as well is just top notch. And this is really what you want to be spending your spell slots to concentrate on when you're not smiting. Everything else is usable here and there. Command can be clutch. Cure Wounds is a little redundant with our Lay on Hands pool. And then Protection from Evil and Good if you're fighting, you know, Aberration, Celestial Elementals, Fey Fiends, or Undead. Could be good. But really, it's Bless. It's Bless. So now moving up to level 3 of Paladin. This is where we vow our sacred oath. And we are, of course, taking the Oath of the Ancients. That gets us 2 options for our channel divinity. Nature's Wrath, which is like a mini entangle spell, if you will. It targets 1 creature within 10 feet of you, so you know, it's a little limited in that regard, but they have to succeed on a strength or a dex save of its choice or be restrained. And then they can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of their turns and free themselves on a success. We also get Turn the Faithless, which is we can turn Fey and Fiends within 30 feet of us on a Wisdom saving throw. So that's also pretty cool. We also get our Oath spells. These are spells that are always prepared and, you know, ready to use for our Oath. And at 3rd level, that's Ensnaring Strike and Speak with Animals. Later on, we get Misty Step and Moonbeam, Plant Growth, Protection from Energy, Ice Storm, Stone Skin, Commune with Nature, and Tree Stride. That is, if we were taking this up to 17th level of Paladin, and spoilers, unfortunately, we are not. So here at level 4 of Paladin, we are at the edge of an abyss looking out, because we have an ability score improvement, and there are so many different things we would like to be doing with this. Really, it comes down to whether we want to improve our strength or our charisma, and there are arguments to be made for both, but I'm going to come down and say we're going to boost our strength. It makes our strikes more accurate and hit harder, and we do need that accuracy pretty desperately for our Great Weapon Master attacks. And unfortunately, we are not classing into a Hexblade, so we don't get the feature from that, which allows us to use Charisma to attack with. Otherwise, we would be going straight Charisma with our ASIs, but for this build, it's going to be Strength. At this point, we would have another spell that we were able to prepare. I've gone with Thunderous Smite, really pick your poison here. Our known spell list is in some ways really good, and in some ways a little lackluster. We have Bless, which is, as I said, what we want to be casting at all times for any situation. There's some other things in here that can situationally be really good if nobody else in the party has it, like Detect Magic, Detect Evil and Good, Detect Poison and Disease, Purify Food and Drink. Like, all of these are things that could come up. They're campaign dependent. We have Speak with Animals, which is an interesting one, and we can cast that as a ritual. And then there's all these different smite spells with our bonus action. There's Shield of Faith. But really, the options that I've selected here are kind of a good cross-section of what you can expect. I knew that we were getting a bonus action Ensnaring Strike already, so I've kind of held off. I've only just gotten Thunderous Smite now. But this is really where my head's at with this kind of a thing. Honestly, the only thing I might swap out is maybe Cure Wounds for possibly, like, Detect Magic or something like that. So, you know, it's up to the eye of the beholder what you want to focus on, what you want to get here. Level 5 is big for us. We get extra attack, allowing us to attack twice instead of once when we take the attack action on our turn, and we also get access to second level spells. So here is our new prepared spell list for this level. We get Moonbeam and Misty Step from our Oath, and they are both clutch spells, really good to have in a pinch, Misty Step especially. I've also swapped out for Aid, Fine Steed, and Lesser Restoration. Aid is a really good support spell. We're maybe not the best one to be casting it because we'd rather use our spell slots on other things like smites, but it is there, and if we're the only one that can cast this before like a really big encounter, a lot of times it is worth it. It increases 3 creatures within range get their hit point maximum increased by 5. That can really come in clutch in certain situations. We also get Fine Steed, which is an excellent utility spell. We are able to summon a spirit that assumes the form of a steed. We can choose, a warhorse, a pony, a camel, an elk, or a mastiff, or other things according to our DM. And it has the statistics of the chosen form, though it is celestial, fey, or fiend. We would probably want to go with fey for this type of character, but it is still up to you, as always. It has an intelligence of 5 or less, its intelligence becomes 6, and it gains the ability to understand one language of your choice that you speak. So you can't have full conversations with it, but you can give it fairly complex commands, and it's going to know what you're talking about and be able to carry them out. It's very useful, and the fact that it's a magical horse and you can recast it whenever you want really comes in clutch. We also get Lesser Restoration, another clutch spell. You can touch a creature and end an effect of blinded, deafened, paralyzed, or poisoned. If anybody is suffering from one of these, and you're not packing this spell, you're going to want to prepare it and use this. Like I said, it's very clutch. It is at this point that we are going to take level 6 of Paladin before we start multiclassing, and that is in order to get Aura of Protection. And that is whenever us or a friendly creature within 10 feet of us must make a saving throw, they get a bonus to that saving throw equal to our Charisma modifier. Right now that is a +3, so that is not bad. And it is absolutely a feature worth sticking around an extra level before you start multiclassing for. And so at level 7, we are going to begin multiclassing into Warlock. We are, of course, going to pick the Archfey as our otherworldly patron, and that gets us the Fey Presence ability. Starting at first level of Warlock, we have the ability to project the beguiling and fearsome presence of the Fae. As an action, we can cause each creature in a 10-foot cube originating from us to make a wisdom saving throw against our Warlock spell save DC, which is thankfully the same as our Paladin DC because it's charisma. And the creatures that fail their saving throws are all either charmed or frightened of us, our choice, until the end of our next turn. For our spells, we get 2 cantrips and 2 first-level spells from the Warlock list. For the cantrips, I've gone with Booming Blade and Eldritch Blast. That's going to cover a lot of our ranged damage from now on, just in case we can't get into range. We no longer have to huck javelins. And I've also picked up Charm Person and Hex. So this gives us access to the classic Warlock move of Hex and Eldritch Blast together, or, Hex and make our 2 Great Weapon Master attacks, or Hex and then Booming Blade, and all of these are pretty good options. We don't want to be hexing too much. Mainly, we want to do that on big boss monsters, I would say. Anything that's going to be a challenge to bring down, or anything that really needs to have an athletics check to grapple made against it. You can impose disadvantage on strength checks with Hex for that, or something that you're trying to hide from, potentially, give it disadvantage on its wisdom perception checks. But we don't want to be relying on Hex near as much as if we were just a pure Warlock. Our Great Weapon Master attacks are doing enough damage, and we have access to Divine Smites, which, for the spell slot, is typically going to be doing more damage than Hex. That said, there's nothing stopping us from using Hex and Divine Smite all on the same target if there's something we really, really, really need to kill. Do keep in mind, though, that if you're concentrating on Hex, you can't also be concentrating on Bless, so you're going to have to make a choice whether you want more accuracy and helping the party that way, or if you just want that little bit of extra damage on a target and possibly the disadvantage on a check that you need to make against it. So, do keep that in mind. At 2nd level of Warlock, we get access to our Eldritch Invocations, and for those, I'm taking Eldritch Mind and Devil Sight. Eldritch Mind is going to give us advantage on Constitution saves that we make to maintain our concentration on a spell, and that is going to help us keep those crucial blesses up in a pinch or a Hex, if that's the way you've decided to go with it. And Devil Sight is going to give us Dark Vision out to 120 feet for both magical and non-magical darkness. As a human, this is a first taste of Dark Vision we're getting, unless you've found Goggles of Night or somebody's been casting Dark Vision on you, but both of those are pretty niche, rare circumstances, so that's probably not been happening. And once we get to 3rd level of Warlock, we are going to be picking up the Darkness spell in order to wombo combo with Devil Sight, so that we'll be getting advantage on our, Great Weapon Master attacks to anything that's blinded in that darkness that can't see us coming. It's a pretty awesome ability, but it is something you'd have to keep your party dynamics in mind when you're doing, and not cut off your party's chances of attacking the enemy as well. So just keep that in mind when you're casting Darkness later on. At 2nd level, we also do get another spell known from our 1st level spells. I've gone with Faerie Fire, but you can just ignore that because we're going to be swapping it out very next level. I just wanted to show you that we do technically get another spell known here, and there is stuff you could take. Faerie Fire is a decent spell. We're not the best one to be casting it, and it's another concentration to be competing with Bless and Hex, and it's just not something that we really want to be casting, but it is a good spell. It can come in clutch sometimes. So, hopping up to 3rd level of Warlock, we get to pick our Pact Boon, and we are going to go with Pact the Blade. This is going to allow us to turn our Greatsword, or whatever other two-handed weapon we've gotten by this point, into a Pact weapon. Hopefully by this point in the campaign, you've gotten your hands on some kind of a magic weapon, whether it's just like a Moon-touched sword or, what have you. A +1 greatsword would be great at this point. But we are going to be able to turn that into our Pact weapon. It gets us a number of features. Basically, we can shunt it into an extra dimensional space and then resummon it at will, which is a pretty cool feature. And that can actually come in handy more often than you'd think in a campaign. Being able to walk into a place unarmed and then just, whoop, magic greatsword. So for our spells at level 3, we are going to swap out Faerie Fire for Darkness and pick up Invisibility. Now that Darkness combo with Devil Sight I've already gone over, and one thing to keep in mind is that this does overlap. It's a concentration spell, so with Bless and Hex, and technically Invisibility, but Invisibility is more of an out-of-combat concentration, so it's not really going to interfere with either of those. It's just sometimes you need to be invisible. even in our heavy armor, clunking around, invisibility can really be a boon. But yeah, that Darkness Devil Sight combo, it's there for us. We can go in and get advantage on all of our great Weapon Master attacks and just really ruin something's day that doesn't have like magical dark vision. And very, very few creatures have anything approaching that, so it's a really, really useful combo to have. And I'm going to say this again because it is very important. Make sure you keep your party dynamics in mind when you're using the Darkness Devil Sight combo. Don't, encroach an area in magical darkness that nobody else can see through, and you're the only one that can do anything in if it's going to interrupt the rest of the party. There are ways where you can find yourself solo with a creature while the rest of your party is dealing with something else, and you can use this combo to its best. Or you could convince everybody else to take the Eldritch Adept feat and pick up Devil Sight, but, that's that's ridiculous. But it is worth mentioning that is a possibility. If everybody has Devil Sight and you cast Darkness now, everybody's getting advantage on everything. But that is a very niche circumstance and not something you really want to consider unless you're feeling goofy today. But yeah, just really, really, really try not to ruin anybody else's time with your magical darkness. Just keep that in mind. At level 4 of Warlock, we get an ability score improvement, and once again, I am going to say improve your strength here. Cap it out at 20. It's your most important stat. Your charisma is worth mentioning, but we're going to boost that later. This is what's important. We really need that melee accuracy and damage output. At level 4, we also get another cantrip. I've gone with Minor Illusion, and another spell known, and I've gone with Mirror Image. Now, the cantrip is completely up to you. It's dealer's choice, whatever you think is going to be useful in your campaign or that you just want to use. And as far as Mirror Image goes, it's a decent defensive buff spell for when you need such things, but I'm probably going to be trading it out next level, so maybe you try it and you like it, you want to keep it, but for me, for this build, I'm going to be trading it out. Moving on to level 5 of Warlock, we get another Eldritch Invocation, and I am going with Eldritch Smite. We are going to double up on our ability to smite our foes. Now we can do it with Divine and Eldritch Power. This is once per turn when we hit a creature with our Pact Weapon, we can expend a Warlock spell slot to deal an extra 1d8 force damage to the target, plus another 1d8 per level of the spell slot, and we can knock the target prone if it's huge or smaller. This is a lot more damage if we combine it with another Smite, and it can really nuke some things. It is very expensive. You're having to spend multiple spell slots to do this, but sometimes things just need to die now. We also get a couple more spells known because we are going to be trading one old spell out, and I have taken Plant Growth and Summon Fae. We are really leaning into our archetype now. Plant Growth is a really good control spell if you can trap a bunch of melee foes in the center of it, and then rain down maybe like Eldritch Blasts or something on them, with the rest of the party maybe being able to help. And Summon Fae is another good concentration spell that you're going to have to make a decision between this and Hex and Bless and Darkness. But having another body on the field is pretty clutch, and here's a stat block for it, and it's got a number of different actions that it can take. It has a multi-attack with a short sword, and it has a Phase Step here as a bonus action that can have a number of different effects. And one of them is, in fact, they can fill a 5-foot cube within 5 feet of it with Magical Darkness, which lasts until the end of its next turn. So you can actually use this in place of the Darkness spell in some circumstances. It's pretty interesting. Moving right along to 6th level Warlock, we get Misty Escape, where we can vanish in a puff of mist in response to harm. When we take damage, we can use our reaction to turn invisible and teleport up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space we can see. We remain invisible until the start of our next turn, or until we attack or cast a spell. Pretty clutch feature. We can only use it once until we finish a short rest, though, so sparingly, but that is pretty clutch to be able to do. We also get to add another spell to our spells known, and I'm going with the tried and true, trusty old counter spell. It's pretty late in our career to be getting it, and probably some other casters in your party should have it by now, but it's always useful to have, and really there's no reason not to take it here. There are a number of other really good spells here, but I just always like having a counterspell in my back pocket, and it is pretty on brand for this type of a character as well. At level 7 of Warlock, we get another Eldritch Invocation, and I am going to loop back around for Agonizing Blast. When we cast Eldritch Blast, we add our Charisma modifier to the damage it deals on a hit. It's a pretty classic combo to combine this and Hex, for a Warlock, and just pew pew pew, laser hands. And at this point in our career, we are past level 11, so we get 3 beams. So adding our current +3 to Charisma to that isn't bad. And we are going to be buffing our Charisma a bit in a bit. Here at level 7, we also get access to 4th level spells, and I have picked up Greater Invisibility. It lasts for a minute, where we can turn ourselves completely invisible, and that concentration doesn't break when we make attacks. So that's a full minute of making attacks with advantage because nobody can see us. That's not bad. It's basically an upgrade from Darkness that doesn't mess with the rest of our party. At level 8 of Warlock, we get an ability score improvement, and we are going to bump our Charisma here, as I've been saying. For level 15, I am going to jump back to level 7 of Paladin. That gets us Aura of Warding. Beginning at 7th level, ancient magic lies so heavily upon us that it forms an Eldritch Ward. We and friendly creatures within 10 feet of us have resistance to damage from spells. That's pretty good. That, combined with our excellent saving throws due to our increasing Charisma, makes us pretty annoying to enemy spellcasters. At level 8 of Paladin, we get an ability score improvement, and I'm going to use this to cap off our Charisma. Jumping back now to level 9 of Warlock, we get another Eldritch Invocation. I've taken Ghostly Gaze, which gives you some limited X-ray vision for a while, because it's kind of cool and I like it, and that's what I would suggest to you, is to find an invocation that sounds kind of cool that you like, and pick that, because at this point, world is our oyster, and it really doesn't matter what we pick from here on out. However, we have also picked up a couple of spells. I neglected to go over this earlier, but I picked Banishment up at 8th level of Warlock, and at 9th level here, I have picked up Hold Monster. Both are pretty good spells to take something out of the fight for a while. And our saving throws at this point, DC, is 19, so we could really get some stuff with that. Even at higher levels, there's a decent chance of failing. And it is at this point in the build that I am just going to dump all the rest of our levels into Warlock to finish off. Along the way, we get another Eldritch Invocation. I went ahead and picked up a Life Drinker that lets us do extra necrotic damage to anything we hit with our Pact Weapon equal to our Charisma modifier. Pretty cool. We also get Beguiling Defenses for our Archfey. Beginning at 10th level, our patron teaches us how to turn the mind-affecting magic of our enemies against them. We're immune to being charmed, and when another creature attempts to charm us, we can use our reaction to attempt to turn the charm back on that creature. They have to succeed on a wisdom save against our Warlock spell save DC, or be charmed by us for a minute, or until the creature takes any damage. It's a very niche feature, and a lot of things that are going to try to charm you are also immune to charm themselves. But hey, it could happen. You never know. I'm sure there's some great stories about this coming in clutch once. So, it's a feature, you take it, you try and remember it, and use it if it comes up. We also get a Mystic Arcanum for 11th level. I went ahead and picked up Conjure Fey as our 6th level spell. It's another on-brand thing to do. And for our final ability score improvement, I went ahead and picked up the Fey Touched feat just to stay on brand, just to give this character a little more flavor. And I picked up Identify and Misty Step, which we already had. This is a fluff feature that I've picked here. You could obviously take something else. You could take the Tough feat for just some extra HP, or any other feat, really. And you'd be off better than this. But I wanted to do this just for a laugh. So here we are at level 20. I've gone ahead and equipped us with plate armor to bring our armor class up to 19. At this point, we would hopefully have some magic armor. Maybe bring that up to 20, 21. Who knows? Maybe we could even find an animated shield. Another thing to use up our bonus action, but hey, that's something we could use with Great Weapon Master. Be pretty cool. We have resistance to damage from spells. We're immune to charmed and disease. Our saves look like this because of our Paladin aura. Even stuff that we don't have proficiency in, and we have negative modifiers in. We've got +4s in Dex and Intelligence, a +10 to Strength, +16 to Charisma. Ain't nobody bamfing us to another plane of existence anytime soon. We've got 152 HP, which is, I would say, below average, especially for a frontline fighter, but it's still nothing to sneeze at, per se. Especially with our armor class and our somewhat defensive abilities that we have. And hey, we have double smites at our disposal. We have Eldritch Smite, which uses our Warlock spell slot, which 5th level, we've got 3 of those pack slots, so that's, 6d8 from that, and then whatever we want to use for Divine Smite. So yeah, that's the character. That's the Faerie Knight. We've got a lot of interesting tools at our disposal from both of our classes. We've got a lot of powerful Warlock spells that can, help us deliver better Great Weapon Master attacks, and then Smite on top of that with. We've got stuff like Darkness and Invisibility that's going to give us advantage. We've got Bless, which could just add a d4. We do have to choose between these, so, we've got to do a lot of risk assessment and manage our resources properly. But when we find our opening and we just go in, sword blazing and just cut down, hundreds of HP at a time, people are going to be sorry they messed with you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. You get to roll all the d8s in the world when you double smite. And even though you burn through your resources pretty darn quick, it's very satisfying. So anyway, that's the build. I hope you like it and have fun.